Very good evening to all the people who are here already. A lovely turnout for the new year. And our topic this evening is, where after Corbynism, where do we go? The left seems to be in complete disarray. Reform is scoring higher, more higher and higher and higher in the polls. Farage seems to be on the up and up, apart from in Elon Musk's eyes. So the left really needs to get its act together. And where does the left go from here? And the person to lead off this discussion is Steve Freeman. So I'm going to add spotlight and ask Steve to start the discussion off for us.
Okay, Carol, sorry, thanks for that introduction. I thought what I would do, first of all, is to just to get into this question, just have a look at these are the points I was going to talk about. Okay, I wanted to talk about the hare and the tortoise, first of all. And then I'm going to talk about the politics of England in 2025. Then I'm going to give an historical perspective, because I think that's really important to sort of get an idea on where we are. Then I'm going to talk about the crisis of democracy a little bit, and then I'm going to try and tie it all together in a conclusion. So that's the kind of 6 points that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to try and do that within no more than 30 minutes if I can. My first point then would be to start with the hare and the tortoise. Okay, you might remember. Let's see if I can just pin that one up a little bit there so I can see more of it. Move that up there. This is one of Aesop's fables. You may remember Aesop's fables. There's going to be a race between the hare and the tortoise. And the hare is obviously very fast. Tortoise is slow, but the tortoise challenges the hare to a race. And the hare races off with every intention of getting there first, but not quite sure which direction. This is my version of the story, by the way. It's not quite sure which direction to go in. Ends up going around it very fast, of course, but ends up going around in many different circles. But is so confident of victory that at some point he decides to sit down, lay down, and have a sleep. And as we know the story, the tortoise, which is just coming along, steady as you go, going in a sort of straight line from A to B, sticking to the plan, sticking to the guns, and eventually, when we get to the finish line, it's the tortoise that wins. And the moral of this fable, of course, is that steady as you go, sticking to where you're going, having a clear plan is better than sort of herring round in ever decreasing circles. Now, I'm going to refer to that later on as an idea, but my first point then is this: England 2025, where we are. And so I thought what I'd do is I'd do a kind of brief map of what I think the political organisations, roughly speaking, are before us. So here's my map. You might do another map, but obviously at the centre of that we've got what I call the establishment centre, the centre right, and the centre left. Then we've got to the right of that, we've got right populism. I think we've got something I'm going to call left populism. And then further out, we've got English fascism. And then on the farther left, we've got English Marxists. The English Marxists, I think, I couldn't fit the word communist in there. And I think a communist is a better term for it. And perhaps they wouldn't like to be English anyway. So communists in England would do for that. So I think that is a kind of sketch that I'm going to work around as a sketch of where we are. And I just simply add to that, get rid of that, and add to the fact that we know, as Carol mentioned at the beginning, that right populism in the guise of reform seems to be where the challenge to Labour is coming. It's coming from the right, with all the talk about Elon Musk and all the money they're going to get, and all the publicity that Farage seems to be there. Now, on the other hand, what happens if we look over there at left populism? We look over on the other side of the the other side of the fence, get rid of those for a minute, just reduce the map down a little bit to right populism and left populism. Is there is an alternative challenge from the left? And so I decided that I thought my map would have this. If we're going to look at left populism, I'm going to use the term, so I'll come back to explain this term at some point. Social monarchists, I think I've got 5 MPs. The Greens, 4 MPs. Social Republicans don't exist as a force. So I'm just putting that out there as an idea, as a programme of policy, but all within the space of what I would call left populism. And I guess if we've got hares and tortoises in here, I think we'll find the hares in the social monarchists, and I think we'll probably find the tortoises in the social republicans. They'll come on to that in a minute. So let us take that argument on a little bit further by just looking inside what I've called left populism. What have we really got there? So if we have a look at this, I think we've got something that's looking a little bit more like that. In left populism, I'm not explaining this term social monarchism just yet. I think I would put the Green Party, somebody I talked to said the Green Party isn't really left populist, but it might, in my book it is, but we might discuss that. And the social republicans, well, who are the left populist social monarchists? I think we've got 3 main contenders in there. We have the Workers' Party, George Galloway's Workers' Party. There's George. And you'll see that George has got some nice colours there, which happen to be red, white and blue. The Independent Alliance, I only learned the other day, this is what it's now called. The Corbyn grouping in Parliament is called the Independent Alliance. And then we have this other group called Collective. So the Collective are, in a way, the kind of new kids on the block. They're the ones that now appear. The Independent Alliance, I don't know what sort of base it has. It's certainly a group of MPs around Jeremy Corbyn. And I would put, here's Collective. And I'm referring to an article that you might find in Weekly Worker by Carla Roberts here. And she talks about Collective. And she, in this article, she lists all these different organizations that have now come together or are coming together to form Collective. And she mentions Aspire, Assemble, Campaign for a Mass Workers' Party, For the Many, I suppose it's not the few, Just Stop Oil, JVL, Muslim Vote, Reliance, Social Justice, Tusk, and Transform. So they're all meeting and coming together. Carrie Murphy, I think, is in charge of that, and Pamela Fitzpatrick is playing a leading role in all of that. And if you were reading Socialist Worker, I put down the bottom there, the SWP seems to be, it's a question mark, seems to be thinking about whether to come on board with this particular project. So this is really going, these are the hares for me. They're the ones that are making the space because there is a vacuum there. And they need to think a little bit about that. Now, I was thinking a bit more historically about left populism, and I had this little diagram, which I think it kind of, oh, there we've got hair in there. We get hair somewhere. I'll just go back a little bit with this diagram. This diagram is meant to show us really that if we think of where the left was before 2015, when New Labour, when Tony Blair was in charge of New Labour, a lot of people, starting with Arthur Scargill, left the Labour Party and formed some new parties. And you can see the list of them there: Socialist Labour Party, Socialist Alliance, Respect, Tusk, and Left Unity. And I myself was in some of those organisations, although I didn't join Respect, but many comrades there will probably have joined those organisations. As soon as Corbyn came on board, as soon as Corbyn came on board. As soon as Corbyn stood for Labour leader and won that Labour leadership, those organisations more or less drained of members. Those members went into the Labour Party. So most of those organisations simply kind of collapsed because the Corbyn project from 2015 to 2019 was where they were all drawn towards. And what we can now see, of course, is with the collapse of the Corbyn project, many of those people are now coming out again. So it's kind of the movement in the opposite direction. Tusk is still there, of course, but now we've had George Galloway's Workers' Party, and he was previously, in a previous incarnation, it was Respect, this independent alliance, which I've already mentioned, and Collective. So there's a kind of movement around, depending on what's going on in the Labour Party. I think all those organisations, SLP, SA, Respect, Tusk, Left Unity, and all the ones down here, all have a similar political programme. They're all trying to do the same thing, and that's what I'm going to look at to see, well, what are they doing? So let us go back into time a little bit now to try and get a historical perspective on the present. Okay, so I thought I would, so I'm going to use, I've used this term social monarchy. Now, some of the comrades here know that term and we used it quite a bit, but there'll be other comrades who are not familiar with that term. So I think I just need to explain that so you can see what's being said here. So if I wanted to explain the social monarchy, I would probably start with a historical piece here, which would go back to when our constitution was formed back in the period from 1688 to 1707, what's sometimes called the Glorious Revolution, that established our constitution monarchy, that said that our sovereignty was vested in the Crown in Parliament. And you can see there we've got the Palace, we've got Downing Street, we've got the Privy Council and Whitehall, all those institutions on the left-hand side of my diagram, which collectively are the Crown plus the House of Lords. Then you've got the Commons, you've got His Majesty's government, Her Majesty's government, and then you have His Majesty's loyal opposition, and then you have the electorate. So that's a sort of simple map of our constitutional and political system. I was asking, where is the king of this castle? And I think the one I really want to put up there, because really to understand how this system functions, the one institution that is really key to understanding where we are, what's happening to our economy, what's happening to our financial system is His Majesty's Treasury. It's central to understanding the Crown and the power of the Crown. Okay, that's the constitutional system that we are working with. And well, let's just take that on a little bit to, well, we've got that, the House of Commons, where we've got the Crown controls Parliament in a two-party system. In the House of Commons, we really got a centre-right and a centre-left, which used to be the Tories and the Whigs, now could be the Conservatives and Labour. It doesn't matter, the original thing, and the Liberal Democrats. I'll move on from that. I don't want to dwell too much on that. Listen to the next point. The next point is this, that now I'm going to use this to get down to this term social monarchy. What do I mean by that? Well, we could say the social monarchy was the kind of version of this system that existed during the Second World, from the Second World War onwards, during and after the Second World War. And I would want to say there are three pillars of this system. One is the Union of England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Another one is the welfare state, the NHS, housing, education, pensions and various other things, and having a mixed economy of private and public sectors. And then the constitutional monarchy itself, with the sovereignty vested in the Crown in Parliament, and not forgetting, of course, the Church of England. So I'll put these three pillars together and say these were the three pillars that our post-war political and social system was built around. And if we wanted to, there we go, a couple of arrows there to say that. And see if the next one comes out. Oh, she didn't come out right. Never mind. Post-war social monarchy. I was going to give us, it's all come out in the wrong order. Okay, so I was listening to the radio last night. I was listening to Nick Abbott, and he said quite rightly the three things that people abroad recognise as being typically British. The three most important things, he said. And they are the things that are, in many ways, the symbols of the British social monarchy. There is the Queen, or now, of course, it's King Charles. There is the BBC. There is the NHS. And these three things together kind of summarise the post-war social monarchy. They're all publicly funded organisations. I like to call it the Elizabethan welfare state. So we can trace our history from 1688, all the changes in our democracy since then, to the Second World War, to the post-war system symbolised. I mean, in many ways, it's Queen Elizabeth II, which is often seen as the kind of symbol of the post-war system, a popular monarch, I think, because of that post-war settlement. Now, with that in mind, let me then just say a little bit about this idea of social monarchism, and then we'll come back to the Labour Party. So social monarchism, not social monarchy, which is describing that post-war system. Social monarchism is essentially a programme and an ideology. What is the programme? Well, if I was to put a programme up there, I would say it was kind of social reform, the health service, public housing, pensions, many other things like that. Public ownership, the mixed economy, the public ownership of our water, gas and electricity, our coal mines, our railways and all those other things that were established after 1945. A progressive system of taxation, strong trade unions as well, I'd put into that. And I think that's really essentially what the Labour manifestos of 2017 and 2019 were all about. Reforming our constitution, changing our system of government, all those things didn't really figure very much, and certainly not centrally in Corbyn, in the Corbyn manifestos. They're always seen as a secondary side issue. They're not the key things. They're not the key points of appeal. So that's the programme. Ideology, well, I've never heard a socialist monarchist calling themselves a socialist monarchist. They usually refer to themselves simply as socialists. We're socialists. But for me, socialist is a disguise, a mask, or a comfort blanket for what actually is, in fact, in a sense, a kind of idea of politics which doesn't deal with the question of democracy. It's what Lenin would have called economism, looking at politics with the democracy bit taken out. And this idea of social monarchism, I would argue, is a very pervasive idea on the English left. And I would go further and say, you know, what is Collective doing at the moment? It's going to form itself around a programme. It's going to look at the Labour manifestos of 2017, 2019, and it's going to repeat, because it's quick, because it's the hair, because it's the fastest. It's going to repeat everything that went back from the Socialist Labour Party, the Socialist Alliance, and so on and so forth through all of that. I was going to make this point really. If we look at the Labour Party in 2017 and 2019, I could see what I would call right social monarchism and left social monarchism. And so I think these are the two people that most probably symbolise that from that period. What's the difference there? So they were all united on the Labour manifesto. And why did people that supported Corbyn, a lot of them voted for Starmer? They probably regret it later, but that Starmer seemed to be having a very similar politics to Corbyn. They seem to both be working around that manifesto, but there is a complete difference. Starmer, right social monarchism, is loyalist, is completely loyal to the Queen and the Crown. He's not called Sir Keir Starmer for nothing. That's a completely loyalist. There's nothing Republican about right social monarchism. On the other hand, Jeremy Corbyn, on the left, and I'd call him a left social monarchist, he has a Republican element to him. He did say, he wasn't in favour of the monarchy, but it wasn't a priority, that's how he phrased it. And of course, Jeremy went along, joined the Privy Council, the Queen's Council, took the oath of loyalty to the Queen, just the same as Starmer did. So left social monarchies may call itself Republican, may even be anti-monarchist, but in reality, its current politics is actually simply to work within the framework of the 1945 welfare state. That's the politics which they are operating within and through. Okay. Let me just look within time. Let me just take this on a little bit further then, about to where I think we are now. Let's have a look. We started before to talk about the epoch of degeneration and the death of the social monarchy. And I think what we can do to think about the post-war period, not as a simple solid block, I think we can think of it as a series of changes of evolution of that post-war social contract, if you like, that was established after 1945. And I've put it up like this: the social monarchy in England, 1945 to 25. And I've just decided to divide it in this way. First of all, we have the original foundation, the rise and fall from 1945. I've put it up to 1979, but we don't want to put particularly strong dates on it. 1979, we have the dismantling of that post-war social monarchy. We have neoliberalism, we have privatization, we have deregulation, we have the idea of the free market rules. And of course, there you see a famous picture of Mrs. Thatcher with the Union Jack, who was set out to get rid of socialism, she said. Get rid of socialism, i.e. to dismantle that post-war settlement. And over here, we got Tony Blair, and the significance, and he's dressed up as a Knight of the Garter, by the way. You see all that flummery around him. So, you know, he's a loyalist as well. And as Thatcher once said, Tony Blair's my greatest creation, meaning by that was that it wasn't this, what Thatcher did with neoliberalism wasn't a one-term thing. It was a permanent shift in the kind of policies of the Crown and the British state from 1979, especially once the miners had been defeated. The defeat of the miners is probably the most important thing in shifting power away from the working class in that period. And then what I've said, the third stage of this stage from 2007, which we've called the degenerate social monarchy, the great, although I call it the great bank robbery, we called it back in 2010 the great bankster robbery, because when the banks went bankrupt, the state stepped in to save them and spent billions and billions of pounds to do so. And then we had austerity. We're living through this period where our whole political and social system is in a state of degeneration. And if I had to describe that, so we're living in a peculiar part of the post-war system. And I tried to sum up how I thought that was. I could skip the next one. I don't know if I can. But anyway, I'm just going to mention, I'll just do this very quickly, mention some of the events that have occurred in this period, from the bank crash, austerity, England's Brexit 2016, the COVID crisis, and now Palestine. All these things are part of that, I would argue, but we haven't got time to go into that, of this epoch that we're now living through. Degenerated. What does degenerated mean? It means it's, in a certain sense, when Trotsky used the term degenerated worker state, meant it isn't really a worker state. It's not really a social monarchy in a way anymore. And I thought I'd try to find the words to describe where I think we are. I think the social monarchy is a bit like the living dead. It's something which is dying. Maybe it's dead. It's not buried. It's like the living dead. So I got a zombie up. I think I want to call it the zombie social monarchy. We're in a state of putrefaction. We're in a state of crisis and I think the thing I'd want to say is we are living in a period now where there's a real and present danger because of this system which is broken, where our rights and liberties, our health and welfare are all under threat, under serious threat. So we're in a peculiar stage, and to describe that stage, yes, it's a breeding ground for racism and sexism. And I think that people have thought that maybe over a period of years, racism was in decline in this country, but now everybody believes and sees that it's actually being ramped up, and it is being ramped up as our system to measure our system in crisis. So, well, we could talk about the social monarchy in crisis. We could talk about Britain. I'm not going to do this too much, but we could talk about the economic aspects, productivity, growth, the things they're talking about on the radio today. The failure of our social care, social system, the fact that we heard today that in hospitals, people are now being, well, they're adapting to the fact that people are going to be cared for in hospital corridors. And that we have but again, we haven't got time to go really into that right now, but it may come up. I'm thinking of this as being a kind of permanent crisis that we're in. And it's a crisis of the political parties. I think the Tory party is in a hell of a crisis. The Labour Party seems to be doing okay, but I think that's just not true. And I think at some point they're losing votes. We could talk about that. The Labour Party, I think the health of the Labour Party is also in a very, very poor state. And I see it as one where the old regime is dying, but the new one is not ready to be born because people are not ready to change the system at the moment from what it is. So we are kind of, I suppose I would say, I call it here with danger, soft sand and deep mud. We are stuck in a quagmire where we can't go forward as a country, and yet we can't go back. We can't go back to the system we had before, and we can't yet go forward to a new system because people have not decided where it is they want to go. And I think at that point, I wanted to say, how do we get out of this quagmire then? And I think that my answer to that is, well, we need some sort of mass movement of people. We need a Republican movement, and we need a Republican Party that's going to make a break from this system. Okay, Carol, am I okay? How am I doing time-wise? I've got not much longer to go. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's okay because we didn't start, we've had 30 minutes.
Okay, well, the end is a few slides to go. Okay, so that's how I understand the present period, the present epoch, the epoch that began from 2007 and still with us today. It's a period of degeneration when things are getting worse. Broken Britain is a term that's used for this, but broken Britain could be fixed. This cannot be fixed because it has gone beyond fixing. It's gone into a kind of meltdown situation. Let us go then on to the crisis of democracy briefly, and say that we're also having we're in a crisis of democracy now. A crisis of democracy is something that exists in America, it exists in many countries at the moment, where people are becoming alienated from the political system. They're losing trust, they're losing confidence, they're losing the belief that the parliamentary democracy can work, that it's failing or it's not working, and beginning to feel that the thing is corrupted by special interest. Now, many of us on the left have always thought that. It's not like something new for us, but for a broader number of people, people are, for a broader mass, that is spreading out the idea that we don't trust Parliament, we don't trust what they're doing. And I said it's universal because you could talk about many different countries, but we have our own particular form of crisis here, because of the nature of our historical evolution of the class struggle, as it were, here in this country. So I think that we're going to have this problem deeper in a certain sense. It's going to become more forceful here, I think, than it is. So where does that lead us? That leads us, I think, to, well, this is the next one. I mean, I just thought an existing democracy is failing. People will conclude we need democratic reform, for example, proportional representation. People think that might be the answer to this problem. But on this side, fascism, and on this side, democratic. These are two outside these straight lines, meaning that they're a break from this constitutional system in different directions. This one over here on the right is saying we need a new democracy. We need a new Republican democracy. This one over here is saying get rid of democracy altogether because it's not working. And I was surprised to see this number today. I read a report that's coming out today or yesterday, I think it was in The Guardian, the FGS Global Radar report. It said that 1 in 5 Britons between 18 and 45 prefer unelected leaders to democracy. Now, maybe that shouldn't be surprising. I don't know if it is, but that to me is a worrying statistic, a worrying sign. And it's because it's at the younger end of this. And if that's the attitude that people have, then that's the attitude that does lead you to, let's have the great leader, let's have the dictator. That is the basis of some sort of ultimately fascism that says dispense with democracy altogether because it doesn't work, it's failed. What we need is a strong leader. And I think that's one of the dangers with the racism and other things, that fascism to me is a real danger because it is more radical. It's more radical than reform is, but reform is probably a transmission belt to that situation. So I think there's a real danger, that's a sign to me of alienation. And I was going to say that here, democratic issues in the United Kingdom. Well, I wanted to say this, that the way we look at it, the way that we look at the price is that there's a crown and that there are the people. So our politics works around a relationship between the crown and the people. And I don't mean the king by crown, as comrades will know. We mean a whole nexus of power at the centre of government. And it includes, as I said before, HM Treasury, which is central to how that operates. It includes the idea that political power is concentrated and centralised in Whitehall and Downing Street and the Treasury. That you might think this was a kind of dictatorship, and I don't mean that in the like a fascist dictatorship. In other words, it's permanent. This rule, this system is being there permanently. It doesn't matter what election comes along. We vote at elections. We still have this dictatorship of actually finance, really, at the end of the day, over what we do as exercised by the Treasury. And I think, to me, therefore, there's a huge imbalance of power between those institutions of the crown and the people. And the essence of the Republican argument is that we must change that. We must turn that. We must invert that. And we must build people power. We must build a system of government which puts people at the centre of that. And of course, between the crown and the people is the House of Commons, which is simply not fit for purpose. We've discussed that, Carol. I know we've done sessions on simply how the House of Commons doesn't do the job that people might think it's doing for all sorts of reasons. And so for what we believe in as Republicans, I would say this: yes, we as Republicans, we believe there's a crisis of democracy, that the basic law, the law of the land, that there should be a written constitution, an end of the union, an end to crown power, a parliament for England, and other things as well in that. And finally, then, I think I come to this point here, is the Republican case. Republican case would simply be this: that we're living in a period where the old order is breaking down, the old social monarchy is in crisis, the welfare state, the economy, everything. There's a crisis, a serious crisis of democracy, and we cannot fix these major problems without first fixing democracy, without having radical democratic change, without transferring power to people. And we call that idea a commonwealth, to create a state which is a commonwealth, which puts the welfare of the people to the fore. And so let me just come back then. Conclusion: what is to be done? Excuse me a minute. 1 second. My computer was about to run out of power. Sorry about that. My conclusion then. This is it, Carol. Here we go. This thing. I've come with this diagram at the end of the left. So we've got the Labour Party, we've got left populism, and we've got the Marxists. That's the left. The left in the Labour Party is still tied up to the Corbyn. The left in the Labour Party is still shaped by the Corbyn project, but there is an element of Republican Labour. I've said in left populism, social republicans, there are some there. And I think if we look to Marxism, there are Republican communists. So I guess my conclusion is if those Republicans in the Labour Party, those in the what I call social Republicans, and those that I call Republican communists can work together, then the tortoises are going to catch up. We're going to catch up and overtake, because the objective conditions is with us, even though we are the tortoises, not the hares. I suppose is where I want to. Revolutionary social monarchism, well, they don't call themselves that. They call themselves revolutionary socialists, but that's the SWP, which is why the SWP can find its way into the Socialist Alliance, Respect, and now may end up in Collective, because its own idea of politics is really the same in disguise. Tomorrow, just to end on this point, tomorrow we have got Bruno Leopold's Citizen Marx, which is making the case for a Republican communism, as well, how I see it. So I think all those are in place. I'm going to end there, Carol. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that was really, really good. A really detailed a really detailed history and explanation of exactly where we are today in Britain.